Have you ever looked at something really familiar, something you thought you knew, maybe like a classic book or even just a painting, and then suddenly you see this hidden layer, a pattern you never
Oh,
noticed?
yeah, absolutely. It completely shifts how you see the whole thing.
Exactly. And that kind of shift, that's really what we're diving into today. We're exploring this really fascinating idea from the sources you've brought about reading the Torah.
Right. It's an approach that suggests this ancient text, the five books of Moses, isn't just, a linear story or a list of laws you read end to end. It's more complex.
Yeah, the material suggests it's actually composed with this incredible structural depth, like a tapestry almost, with patterns woven right in.
hmm A masterful tapestry is a great way to put it.
So our mission here in this deep dive is to really understand this concept. The sources call it the esoteric woven Torah. What is that weave? How does it actually work?
And crucially, what does it show us? What deeper meanings about the text, maybe about the divine names, does this structure actually reveal?
Okay, so think of us as helping you navigate these sources you've gathered. We'll pull out the key insights, figure out what makes this approach tick, and, get a real sense of what it's like to encounter this text in a totally new way.
Sounds good. Where should we start?
Let's start with the core idea. The sources mention visual rhetoric. What does that mean, practically speaking? It wasn't just written down to be read aloud.
Exactly. It suggests the text was designed to be seen, maybe on the scroll itself. The meaning isn't just in the words, but how they're arranged, the structure.
So this visual design creates like two different ways to read it for different people.
That's the idea. There's the exoteric reading. That's the straightforward linear flow, the story of the law, is what the sources call the reading for the many.
Okay, the surface level maybe?
Kind of. And then there's the reading for the few, for those who are, let's say, attuned to see the esoteric meanings hidden in that structure.
It's like one layer is the story, and underneath there's this whole other pattern woven in.
Yes. And that's why the weaving analogy is so helpful. The sources talk about seeing the text as a two-dimensional thing, like fabric. They focus a lot on these 86 units in the Torah.
Units, what are those?
They're distinct blocks of text, compositional sections often marked by spaces in the traditional scrolls, ancient scribal markers. These units are like the fundamental pieces that get woven together.
Okay, so if we're picturing a weave, you've got the warp threads, the vertical ones,
Right.
and the weft threads going across horizontally. How does that map onto these text units?
Well, the sources use warp threads to describe connections that run sort of vertically through the text, underlying themes, repeated ideas that might connect different units, even far apart ones.
Ah, okay.
And the weft threads are more like the horizontal flow within a unit or across a sequence of units, the narrative progression, the development of an idea in that section.
So seeing how those warp and weft threads cross, that's how you start to see the hidden structure.
That's how you begin to decode it, yeah.
Yeah.
And reading this way, it's not passive at all. The sources call it a creative endeavor.
Creative, how so?
Well, you're not just absorbing information. You're actively finding the meaning that emerges from these connections. It's like being a bit of a detective, or maybe like a poet seeing resonance. You have to integrate these structural insights with the plain meaning of the words.
So you're kind of holding two things in your mind at once, the linear story and the structural map.
Precisely. It's a dialogue, really, between the surface and the depth, the exoteric and the esoteric. The aim is to get beyond just the sequence and see the whole picture, the composition is painting, and how each part fits into that big weave.
That makes sense. It reveals things, contexts, maybe intentions that you'd just completely miss otherwise.
You got it. It's a whole different level of engagement.
Okay, this is fascinating conceptually, but let's get concrete. Can we look at an example? How does this actually look in the text? Your sources mention the creation story, Genesis Unit I.
Yes, Genesis 1, verses 1 through 2.3. It's presented as a key example, a paradigm, the 6 days of creation, right? They each have that clear ending. There was evening and morning.
Why am I marking them off?
Those act as clear compositional blocks, but the sources show it's woven more intricately. There's a prologue, then the main 6-day section, and an epilogue.
And you mentioned parallels between the prologue and epilogue.
Significant parallels, yeah. They frame the whole thing structurally. But then within the 6 days, the weave gets even more interesting. The sources talk about these warp threads labeled Aleph and Bet.
Okay.
These seem to relate to two different perspectives on creation. It's hinted at, apparently, by how the Little Hebrew word Vav is used. Sometimes it means and, sometimes more like now, or indicating a new stage. Subtle, but key.
So 2 perspectives, what are they?
Perspective Aleph is described as from above, Think creation ex nihilo from nothing, establishing the inanimate world, the foundations.
Got it.
Perspective bet is from below. More like ex materia, working with what's there, shaping it, bringing forth animation, life, movement.
Wow. So the structure itself is teaching something here.
That's the insight, yeah. The weave shows that reality isn't just one or the other. Creation has this inherent duality. It's both from nothing and working with material. And this is tied to the nature of God as presented here. The name Elohim used in this chapter. Elohim works through both channels, Aleph and Bet.
So the text structure is actually revealing a deep metaphysical point about reality and the divine. That's pretty profound. The sources even mention the phrase, "let us make man in our image."
Yeah, they suggest that plural might be a textual hint towards this duality within Elohim's creative act, alongside using both image and likeness. The woven structure makes that potential hint much more visible by showing the whole account is built on this dual perspective.
Okay, another big example the sources use is the Decalogue, the Ten Commandments. That one feels naturally visual, stone tablets.
It really is a perfect visual for the weave concept, isn't it? The two tablets themselves are like the warp threads, the basic structure, and the 10 words, the commandments, are woven across them like weft threads.
But the key insight isn't just that they're on tablets, it's how they were inscribed, right? The sources say alternately.
Exactly. Not, commandments 1 to 5 on tablet 1 and 6 to 10 on tablet 2, but alternating. Word 1 on tablet A, word 2 on tablet B, word 3 back on A, word 4 on B, and so on.
Okay, wait. So that creates 5 pairs of commandments.
Precisely. 5 consecutive pairs, each pair spanning across the 2 tablets. This specific pairing, revealed by seeing the structure, is apparently key to understanding the underlying organization.
And the sources connect this to the story about the 2 sets of tablets. The first one's Moses smashes.
And the second set, which only Moses sees intact.
Yes.
They read that narrative as demonstrating the 2 audiences.
The smashed tablets are like the public, exoteric view, maybe seen as just a list of broken rules.
Exactly. Fragmented laws. While the second, intact set, seen only by Moses, represents the esoteric view, seeing the Decalogue as this complete, coherent, structured composition with its hidden connections.
Okay, so looking at those 5 pairs created by the alternating structure, they have a symmetry.
A striking concentric symmetry, yeah. The middle pair, let's call it C, is the pivot. Pairs A and B, the first 2, relate to YHWH, the divine name. Pairs D and E, the last 2, relate to people and possessions.
So human life, pair C, is right in the middle.
Right. Positioned structurally between our duties to the divine, A and B, and our duties in the world, towards each other and property, D and E. It's like a visual map of the human condition within the covenant, linking sacred and mundane.
That's really elegant, and the sources said something about reading the second tablet, the even commandments, in different directions.
They do, yeah. Reading it bottom up apparently shows a kind of hierarchy of social relationships, from weaker to stronger. Reading it top down suggests a chain of dependencies like piety towards parents might be foundational for other things. The structure supports multiple layers of meaning.
This brings us neatly to another major thread the sources highlight. The divine names, especially Elohim and YHWH in Genesis. Making that distinction is apparently crucial for this woven reading.
Yes, very much so. The idea is they aren't just interchangeable synonyms for God. The weave helps show them functioning almost like different characters or maybe different aspects or perspectives of the divine within the story.
And the Garden of Eden story, Unit 4, is special because it's the only place where the combined name YHWH Elohim appears.
That unity is presented as really significant. YHWH Elohim forms the garden, forms Haram, who's described as a compound being, dusk plus divine breath. This is contrasted with the Adam created earlier solely by Elohim in the image of Elohim.
And after the garden.
After the separation from the garden, the names appear distinctly, often highlighting different roles. YHWH might be associated with one aspect, Elohim with another.
The flood story is used as a strong example of this distinction.
A prime example, yes. The sources analyze how YHWH is depicted acting from above, sending rain to blot out life from the face of the earth, whereas Elohim acts from below, bringing up the waters of the deep to destroy flesh under heaven. The details reinforce these different perspectives linked to each name.
And this extends even to the kinds of covenants they make.
It seems so. YHWH's covenants tend to be described as more expansive, demanding wholeheartedness, promising vast territories like unto the great river Euphrates. Elohim's demands seem more limited, physical like circumcision promising the specific land of Canaan. It mirrors that flood distinction. YHWH's scope is perhaps broader, Elohim's more focused on the tangible, the earthly.
This gets visualized again, doesn't it, in Jacob's dream, Genesis Unit 14th. He sees Elohim below, YHWH above, and the ladder.
Yes. That dream is read structurally as laying out the plan for how the transcendent YHWH aspect will become progressively revealed in the lower world, the realm more associated with Elohim. Jacob and his descendants become the means for this.
The ladder itself.
The ladder is the connection. The sources even point out a fascinating ambiguity in the Hebrew. Is YHWH standing on the ladder, or is Jacob? It suggested this is resolved by seeing Jacob as the ladder. He and his story become the conduit.
Wow. Okay, that's a powerful reading of how the narrative develops that theme. Let's shift gears slightly. Another example. The plagues in Exodus Unit 3.
Right, the plague weave. The sources argue this isn't just a sequence of punishments. The structure suggests the signs were designed for two purposes, two audiences.
Pharaoh, obviously.
Yes, to pressure Pharaoh and his court, but also simultaneously to create a lasting text or record for future generations of Israelites, so they would gain knowledge of YHWH.
And this unit also has a visual structure, a 5-stage theme horizontally and 3 sets of 3 signs vertically.
That's the analysis, yes. The horizontal weft threads organize the signs according to a spatial logic. For instance, one thread groups signs initiated by Aaron, often involving the ground or water. Another thread groups signs by Moses, often related to the sky. And a third thread involves actions between them.
And this creates a feeling of an upside-down world.
That's how the sources describe it. It's seen as structurally inversing the order established in the creation weave. Instead of orderly creation from top down, you have divine power disrupting the natural order coming from the ground up or intervening from the sky down in chaotic ways.
And the vertical warp threads, they group the signs differently.
Yes. The first set of 3 signs, for example, all occur in the morning and target 3 distinct levels of the created world: the lower waters, the land biosphere, and the upper water sky.
And Pharaoh is prominent in that first set.
Right. It's noted that he appears there, fittingly, as he represents the earthly power trying to control or master that mundane world. The signs are read as systematically reversing or attacking the order of creation. Light becomes darkness, water becomes blood, playing directly against that Genesis backdrop.
Moving into Leviticus, the sources describe it not just as laws, but as having this coherent structure with a suasive intent, guiding the reader.
Yes, guiding them on a sanctifying journey, as one source puts it, mapping out a new and living way. It's seen as having a very deliberate, concentric structure.
Concentric, like circles moving inward. How does that work?
It's compared to the structure of the tabernacle. The outer sections of the book, the outer threads of the weave, are like the outer courtyard dealing with issues outside the main sanctuary.
Okay.
Then you have transitional sections, like the holy place in the tabernacle. And right at the very center, structurally and thematically, the sources place the laws concerning the family unit.
Like the Holy of Holies, the family is at the core.
That's the analogy used, yes. The structure visually emphasizes the centrality of family purity and integrity within this sanctifying journey.
And Leviticus 19 comes up again, relating back to the Decalogue, seeing the shattered tablets rewoven.
Exactly. That chapter, when analyzed according to its ancient paragraph divisions, the Petuhat and Sedimot, is seen to present 5 pairs of laws that echo the structure of the 10 Commandments.
But with a difference.
Yes. The sources highlight a conceptual gradient. It moves from basic do-nots avoiding criminal or antisocial acts through transitional stages, culminating in the positive command to love your neighbor as yourself. The structure itself reinforces this progression towards a higher ethical and spiritual state.
Okay, so we've seen this weaving principle in specific stories in the structure of Leviticus. Does it apply to the whole Torah, the entire Pentateuch?
The sources argue strongly that yes, it does. The entire 5-book structure can be viewed as a macro weave. You can read it chronologically, of course, as history unfolds.
The linear path.
Right. Or you can see it concentrically, structurally, as this almost static but deeply interconnected picture.
And this big picture also has warp and weft threads.
It does. The horizontal warp is identified as Genesis, Leviticus, and Deuteronomy. These 3 books together are seen as establishing the natural foundations, the created order, the principles of human existence within it.
Okay, the baseline reality.
Sort of. Then the vertical weft is Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers. This thread represents the supernatural Yoming. Overlay the story of YHWH's progressive revelation and entry into the world. That journey from heaven to Sinai to dwelling in the midst of the camp.
And Leviticus is in both. It's the intersection.
Exactly. Leviticus sits right at the crossroads, structurally and thematically. It's where the natural foundations meet the supernatural revelation. Its central position in the 5 books underscores this crucial linking role.
That's a really interesting way to view the whole structure. The sources also mention symmetry within Genesis itself, 19 units grouped.
Yes, grouped into 6 sets of 3, plus 1 independent unit. And these groups are arranged symmetrically, the beginning and end sections, A and F, mirroring each other, and the intersections, B, C, and D, E, also showing parallels. This structural symmetry is argued to create conceptual symmetry, tying themes together across the book.
And there was even a hint about Ezekiel's chariot vision, a possible connection.
Yeah, that was raised more as a speculative point, a question for further thought. Could the 5-part structure of the Torah, with Leviticus at the center, somehow resonate with Ezekiel's vision of the divine throne supported by 4 faces or living creatures? Is there a shared underlying paradigm? It's provocative.
It definitely makes you look for patterns elsewhere. It sounds like really engaging with this woven text, seeing these structures. It's not easy. It requires effort from the reader. Oh, absolutely. It's not a passive consumption of text. Accessing these deeper structural meanings requires, careful attention, analysis, and that creative endeavor we talked about. You have to be an active participant, constantly asking how the pieces fit, what the arrangement signifies.
You're in dialogue with the text's structure, not just its words.
Precisely.
And for listeners who are intrigued, who want to try and see this for themselves, the sources mentioned there are tools available.
Yes, they did. Things like the Woven Torah, which is an English translation specifically laid out to highlight these units and potential structural connections, and also online resources like shover.com or academia.edu, where some of this research in the Hebrew text marked with these divisions can be found. They aim to help you start exploring this yourself.
Because the real value, it seems, is finding these thematic links, these overarching conceptual plans that are basically invisible if you're only reading linearly or listening. That's the core takeaway, I think. It reveals the Torah not just as a collection of stories and laws, but as this incredibly intricate, multi-layered composition planned with profound depth. It adds whole new dimensions of context and meaning.
So, pulling it all together then.
Yeah.
What your sources present is this compelling picture of the Torah. A text many feel they know as potentially also being this sophisticated visual two-dimensional weave. And for those who learn how to, let's say, read that structure to see beyond just the sequence of words, it opens up hidden connections, deeper layers of meaning, and reveals just an astonishing level of compositional artistry.
It really transforms it, doesn't it? From just a scroll of words into something more like a complex living a diagram of reality, perhaps, and the divine interaction with it.
Which leaves us, and you listening, with a final kind of provocative thought. If ancient foundational texts like the Torah were potentially composed with this kind of intricate, multidimensional architecture, what does that suggest about the nature of the text itself?
And about the sheer density of meaning that might be waiting there, ready to be discovered through this kind of careful, creative engagement.
Yeah. And could learning to read this way, training your mind to look for underlying structures, for the weave in the text, could that change how you approach other complex information? Maybe even how you perceive the patterns hidden in the world around you?
It certainly encourages a more active, a more curious, and definitely a more multi-layered way of seeing things. Something to think about.